Hello and welcome to Service Above Self. My name is Clark Mason. Service Above Self is intended to highlight the work being done by service organizations around the world in service of their fellow man. Tonight we're here to talk about disaster relief and one of the forms of that with Peter and Sue Klock from ShelterBox USA. In the past year we've seen many different disasters, probably most notable, of course, the disaster in Haiti, but it's not the only one that's been happening around the world where we've seen major disasters, and ShelterBox is an organization that helps out with that. Sue, can you tell us about some of the things that happens in a disaster like Haiti where things have really gone south and the infrastructure is really gone?
I think that typically in an area such as Haiti, which is already struggling with infrastructure and development, you have a situation like this, whether it's near an urban area as it was in Haiti, or in the recent earthquake in China that was out in a rural area. You wind up with a country that doesn't have the ability to deal with the problems of people who have totally lost everything. And that's really what our disaster relief is meant to do, is to help people who have truly lost everything and need to not only have shelter, but need to recover some feelings of just feeling as though they're a little bit safe, that they can rely on things and that somebody's there to help them.
Yeah, so there you are, and you've survived the immediate disaster. In other words, you've survived the earthquake, you've survived the flooding or whatever has happened. But that doesn't mean that worse things aren't coming. So in this type of a situation, what types of things are people up against? Certainly sanitation, water, those types of things are problems. Peter?
Can I address that?
Absolutely.
In Haiti, one of the things that we were told, the first few boxes, first several hundred or thousand boxes that went, were used outside of hospitals. They would take someone that had an amputee and put him in the tent to get him away from the elements. And we saw a picture of a little boy with the school kit coloring in a coloring book, and big smile on his face, and he's missing one of his legs. It's really heartwarming, but touching. But they are eventually going to be used for shelter for the people, for 10 people. It's a 10-man operation, 10-person tent with 3 rooms.
So you have to imagine that if this happened to one of us, you have a home. It has electricity, it has water, it has sanitation, and in reality, you could run into a situation where you've lost all of that. So your ability to progress from there in order to rebuild is hampered by the fact that these things, in many cases, are now gone, and so the risk of things like disease impeding whatever return to normalcy that you might have could be a problem.
That happened during Katrina. We actually shipped 1,400 boxes to Katrina victims, Americans, and they were in 3 different states.
No, so that's definitely an interesting thing. So these are not just things that are sent to other countries, they are sometimes used here. So what types of things do we find with the case of a shelter box that helps people start to recover from the disaster?
Well, the ShelterBox box itself contains the tent, which is a 10-man tent, and it truly will hold 10 large people, but very often it's used for an extended family, so maybe a mother and young children, or a husband and wife and young children, or a grandmother and children if the kids have been orphaned, and sleeping equipment for those people. And the reason I say equipment is because it isn't just always a sleeping bag, because we send these to various places in the world, and there are some groups who don't want to sleep in sleeping bags. They regard them as death shrouds, so that we send blankets for people. We have a stove, a small stove that can work on any it's a multi-fuel stove that can work on any liquid fuel that you can find around, because it has different nozzles. One of the most important things we do is provide water purification for the 10 people who are going to use the tent. Originally, ShelterBox is about 10 years old, and originally what went out were water purification tablets and a breather jug, which if you're a camper knows the plastic jugs that you fill with water and then throw the tablets in, mix it up, and it would be enough for 6 months. But actually in the last couple of years, we've come up with a much better filtering mechanism that goes out with the boxes and can provide for some more than a couple of years for a family to use to collect their water needs for a day, that will be purified and won't have bacteria and viruses. So we have that. We have some tools that go typically. These boxes are packed for each disaster, so you can't say, I know for sure there'll be mosquito nets, because some of them are going places where, believe it or not, you don't need protection against mosquitoes if you're up in the mountains in Kashmir, where you're worrying about snow more than
right. Certainly, if it's
mosquitoes.
cold enough,
But we definitely have them going to places where there are mosquito netting is necessary, and that goes, and other items that are necessary.
So how did this all come about? The ShelterBox is it something that was developed over time, or where did the idea for this come up?
The person who came up with this idea is excellent. He's a great entrepreneur, fits perfectly into Rotary in my view, because we'd always talk about us being a business and professional organization, but he was watching a TV show. He lives in England, and with his wife, a news program where they were just typical thing in a disaster, throwing flour sacks off the back of a truck, and people were scrambling to get them and stomping on each other, and he just said that is no way to get people relief when they're in that kind of a disaster. So he started developing this idea, and he brought it to his Rotary Club as a Millennium Service project in 2000, and so the idea evolved from that to have, and the club adopted it, and then
he went around to other clubs in England, and during the first year he raised enough money for over 100 boxes. That's $100,000. One club starting a project and coming up with that kind of return the first year is kind of amazing.
And it certainly shows the difference that people can make in preparing to deal when these disasters occur. I think that's one of the greatest things about ShelterBox is the fact that this is a proactive program. Many of these things are warehoused ahead of time, and then of course customized for wherever they have to go.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And we actually have, in addition, over the years, developed partnerships with some companies which will warehouse prepackaged boxes for areas where we typically know around the Indian Ocean you're going to need certain items in every box. So they're stored in Dubai and ready to go on a boat right away to an area that needs to have them delivered. And we also have the Dutch Royal Navy has them on their ships in the Caribbean. So as the years have gone by and we've been sort of shown to be effective, we have more groups who are willing to step in and help businesses and governments willing to help us get the boxes delivered where they need to go.
What types of methods are used for transportation to get them from wherever they're stored to the end user, as it would be?
With the tsunami, which occurred on December 26th in 2004, we had 200 boxes on the ground within 3 days. And during the subsequent year, 14,000 boxes were shipped to tsunami victims. And Virgin Airways provided the transportation at no cost. It's really a...
They get the boxes of typically airlines, and even sometimes in Sri Lanka, they told their private airlines that were coming from Heathrow to their country, you're going to carry shelter boxes on your planes. That we just need the boxes here. So they actually use different methods, but when you get beyond the point where the airplane can land, we've had helicopters then they can be provided in Pakistan. The Pakistani Air Force flew some that then went further, and then they were put on trucks, and from there they were put on donkeys, so to go further above 6,000 feet. So we've used boats. I think just about anything you can imagine has been, including at the very end user. We've seen a picture of a woman carrying a box on her head, and these boxes weigh over 100 pounds. So in countries where you learn to do that in your, as a means of carrying things, people are able to do that too.
No, I think it's a pretty amazing thing that, you know, while we see the box here and it looks pretty sizable, at the same time, this is a fairly compact thing that can provide shelter and the ability to cook and to provide clean water, all in a fairly small package that makes it very mobile to get it to the far corners of the earth when bad things happen. So I think that's a pretty amazing thing.
I think that one reason that ShelterBox as a disaster relief organization has been so effective, aside from the 33,000 Rotary clubs around the world. Tom Henderson, the founder of ShelterBox, says he has 33,000 offices around the world. But the reason it's so effective is because we learned at the time of the tsunami that you can't just send boxes when you start going out in the numbers. We've been sending just 100 boxes or 200. If you're going to send 14,000 boxes in a short period of time, then you need to be sending out a team of people with those boxes to ensure that they get where they should be going and that they're set up correctly. And so ShelterBox came up with this ShelterBox response team idea, and these are really very well-trained people, very often EMTs, firemen, people who are able to get out there, typically younger than I am. So Peter and I do what we do here in the United States, but these are the ones who really can get out into the disaster area and cope with the conditions there and make sure that the right people are getting them and make sure that they know how to set up the tents and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would imagine that certainly takes some doing. I watched the two of you put together the tent, and that certainly was one.
Right. One a day is enough.
Yeah, I was going to say it was a pretty difficult project,
set up hundreds at a time.
And I would imagine some instructions would certainly be helpful with that. And you know, you never know what languages that you would need to do that in. So coming with assistance of how to put it together and how to use it all, I'm sure is a very important and a much more effective way to actually get that disaster relief going.
And most of the countries where these get shipped, there are Rotary clubs present there as well. Not all the time, but most of the time. And like, for instance, Myanmar or China, there aren't any Rotary clubs. But most of the places they go, there are Rotary clubs, and so the Rotarians in that country will help distribute the boxes as well.
We also work with the UN in Africa.
That's it.
And we work with Oxfam. We work with other organizations. And we don't call up and say, we know you need our boxes when we see something on the news. What happens is there is a request for boxes from anywhere. It could be a country, it could be an individual, it could be the United Nations, and then the situation is investigated by somebody from the teams and then decide what to do.
One of the things that happened last year, there was an earthquake in Italy, you may recall. And we had a team over in France at that very time. They went across the border to the village and they determined that they needed a couple of hundred boxes. So they called England and put them on a lorry, and they were on their way to the village when the Prime Minister of Italy, Berlusconi, said, we don't want any outside help, no foreign aid. So this truck arrives with these boxes and the mayor says, I'm sorry, my hands are tied, I can't accept this from foreign aid. And the Rotarians said, well, can you accept it from Rotary Italy? And the mayor said, well, of course. So they gave it to Rotary Italy.
There's always a way around that kind of stuff.
They're very resourceful, this ShelterBox response team.
In the case of, obviously, the stuff that we see in these boxes all costs money. So how is this type of a program normally funded?
Well, the boxes themselves cost $1,000 US delivered anywhere in the world. And when I always say that because if you stop and think what it would cost an individual to ship a 100-pound plus box to some place where these boxes typically go, it would certainly cost as much as the box.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So anyway, but basically Peter and I, out spreading the word about this, will say, okay, it's $1,000, but there are businesses that contribute to this, service organizations, certainly Rotary, because it's originally a Rotary Club project, has been absolutely fantastic. The different clubs supporting this. We've had our high school students who are in an Interact, which is a Rotary Club sponsored thing, will go out in our local area. They go out and they do a homeless in the park event for a night and actually sleep out in a park in a cardboard box to sort of try and feel as though what it would be like to sleep in a park for the homeless, and they get people to come by and donate money to them. So they might raise $1,000 or, for lucky, $2,000 for a box. So at the time of a big disaster like Haiti, it's amazing. I think that has just, that really touches people, and then they're interested. They want to know what they can do, the same way we did at the time of the tsunami. So it's $1,000 a box, and it can come from a church group, it can come from a Rotary group, it can come from a Lions Club. It doesn't matter.
$1 at a time
exactly,
to make up the $1,000,
exactly,
and you end up with the box.
We already have 15,000 boxes on the ground in Haiti, and the commitment is for a total of 18,000, and I suspect that will grow. But they have enough to house 150,000 people already.
So certainly a great start.
Yep.
Absolutely. When we come back, we're going to actually take a look at the things that are contained within the shelter box, and so we'll be back in a minute to take a look at that.
Could you dedicate yourself to a worthy cause? Could you go the distance to keep a child healthy? Could you travel across the globe to help eliminate polio? A Rotary member could. We're dedicated to connecting children with vaccinations and ending polio worldwide. Could you help change the world? Rotary. Humanity in motion.
Salam.
Jam.
Shanti.
We all want the same thing.
Peace.
And Rotary clubs are making it happen. Through international scholarships to promote peace around the world. Rotary. Humanity in motion.
Welcome back to Service Above Self. We're speaking with Sue and Peter Klock from ShelterBox about disaster relief that they can do in a pretty small package. Well, Sue, this is a pretty impressive thing that you've got here. This tent is certainly larger than anything that I ever had in Boy Scouts or since. What can they do with a tent this size?
Well, you can definitely fit 10 adults in this tent if you have to. I think typically, as I think I said before, that it's a family or a grandmother who might have children who'd been orphaned who would be in it, so you're not really challenged to have 10 big guys like yourself all sharing the tent. The nice thing about it is that there are partitions so that you can actually close off either side here and have some children sleeping or have somebody change their clothes. There's privacy in there within this, and this is part of the dignity factor when we talk about shelter, warmth, and dignity with this box.
So good. This keeps you out of the rain and out of the sun, and gives you a little bit of protection from the elements. What other types of things do you have in the box for people to use as far as maybe sleeping accommodations or things of that nature?
We have either a sleeping bag or a blanket, depending on where it's going.
Can I open it up?
Unfurl the blanket.
This is absolutely, we have people who want to use these at Rentschler Field. This is waterproof on one side, very, very comfy flannel on the other side. You can wrap yourself up in this, but it doesn't offend the people who, especially Muslims, will not use a sleeping bag. And many of our boxes do go into countries that will have not just, one religion. There are many countries. Myanmar is predominantly a Muslim country.
And you certainly have to
Sure.
take into consideration any type of local customs when trying to
Absolutely.
Give them accommodations. Right. Other than that, we have other things for the persons themselves. We have, what types of things do we have in here?
We could be sending a box anywhere from into an area in Africa that's very, very hot and has problems with mosquitoes, or even in Haiti there are issues with the mosquitoes. So we'll have a treated mosquito netting that can be washed and still will last, and the treatment will continue, and that will go in. But also, if we're sending boxes into places where it's too cold for mosquitoes, we send children's gloves and hats, and also adult-sized gloves and hats in boxes that are going to places that are going to be where you've had an earthquake up in a mountainous area where you're actually going to be experiencing a challenge of extreme cold rather than heat. And we have ponchos, and many of our boxes go into places where it's essentially a rain problem. There's flooding and that kind of thing, and the people there will still need those. And when we can pre-pack the box for a particular disaster, then you can put in 10 ponchos, or you can put in more mosquito netting.
Okay, so we've got them housed and clothed, and then of course we need to take care of things like water and nutrition and stuff like that.
And this is the filter that Sue mentioned earlier. It's a gravity-fed filter, 4 feet. You put the water in here, and it goes through a micromesh filter and comes out this white tube. This filters out bacteria and viruses, and there is talk about putting a module on top of it that'll add vitamins to the water. And we're hoping that they're going to invent some kind of a module that will take arsenic out of the water, which is a problem in South Asia.
This is a relatively new product by the
backflush
Life
once
Straw.
a day using the red ball.
So that should help you prevent from catching disease from contaminated water.
Absolutely.
When we send out hundreds of boxes, the green boxes like this, we would typically send one blue box, and that blue box would contain a couple of hundred of these backpacks which contain school supplies plus some blackboard paint. And so when it goes to the village, they can set up a school. I mean, the children they've been through a disaster, they're bored to tears, and this gives them a chance to get something to keep them occupied. There's crayons and pencils and protractors and paper in here for them to learn and to do things like coloring books.
Very good.
Then we got a multiple fuel stove here, which will burn many different kinds of flammable things. And this was invented by the son of Tom Henderson, and this is meant to go in the box. And this is a container for the fuel that you'll find. We have 2 other stoves over here, which are primarily for Africa. They're wood-burning stoves. The one that's sitting lower is double-walled, so it's much more efficient in terms of consuming wood. This one is off the ground. They both have a stovepipe to get the smoke away from the children, which will help their respiratory systems.
That would make a great big difference. Certainly the type of things that you can get for breathing smoke are pretty tough. And then beyond that, we have tools. And so these are things that can, I would assume, aid in the rebuilding of their communities.
I think that the interesting thing about the tools is that they're, and it's true of the tent as well, that Tom Henderson and his group in England, who are the people who are getting these objects together to put into the boxes, they come from all around the world. They don't just get one supplier, and they don't just get England to supply them something, although they've got this spade that is going to be used, is a company that is an English company, but they get other things from Germany, and the tents themselves come from China. And one of the good things, sad, you have disasters, that's what's prompting this, but the interesting things is that the Chinese company, Vango, that makes the tents, was allowed to keep supplying us tents even all during the earthquake a couple of years ago when ShelterBox was helping there, but we were concerned that they would stop the shipment of tents to us because they really needed them in their own country. But they didn't do that. The government and the company were very good about continuing to supply us.
Oh, very good. So we certainly have other tools. I suppose that in the case of some of these digging implements, that would be important for sanitation as well, as far as making some sort of a latrine type of thing to prevent disease from spreading through poor sanitation. So really get down to the...
One of the things that I found curious about this looks old, and indeed it is. It has the date 1957 on it. And this can either be the blade heading off in that direction, or the spike heading off in that direction or that direction. It's got many different uses. I think it's probably used first for digging foxholes during the Korean War. But this is ultimate in recycling.
So in that case,
some older thing that they've found useful and they can get in
absolutely.
there,
So some government surplus kind of stuff that can actually find new uses in different parts of the world. So that's certainly a wonderful thing. So these are certainly things that that people can do to start to restore normalcy.
With the cooking equipment, we've got pots and pans, and inside of here there are bowls for eating, and forks, knives, and spoons, and there should be 10 of each in a box. We don't necessarily have 10 of everything in our box because we have other things that are, we gathered through the years. So like we've got 3 stoves. That the box would only contain 1 stove.
Right, and that would be appropriate for whatever area that it was going to. That
Absolutely.
would be, you know, if you don't happen to have any type of a liquid fuel available, and the only thing available is, you know, a plentiful supply of wood, that would certainly be the way to go. Now, it certainly seems that this is something that could help out a lot in a disaster. If someone wanted to help out your cause with your organization, what do they need to do?
They can contact us in our local area, but also you can go to the ShelterBox USA website, or you can go to the ShelterBox website for the English pictures, and that actually has even more photos from disasters than the ShelterBox USA site. But it costs, as we said, $1,000 anywhere in the world, and you can actually go online and make credit card contributions to ShelterBox USA.
One of the things that we want to stress is you cannot designate where the box goes. That is determined by ShelterBox Trust in the UK, in England. We've had a lot of people that are upset about that because they want the boxes to go to Haiti, but we can't change that policy. That's a policy that's been in existence with ShelterBox since its beginning.
It's important because we need to keep replacing inventory. If we hadn't had people donate the thousands of boxes that were donated before the Haitian earthquake this year, we wouldn't have been ready to go with boxes for that earthquake. So it's really a matter of, it's a very well thought out policy. I think it's just that people need to understand it.
And so it's much more proactive than reactive.
Absolutely.
In this case. So
Absolutely.
when the need arises, this particular type of relief is immediately ready to go.
Right. And so we can pack the box as appropriate for that disaster. We didn't send the tools and the cooking supplies when we sent relief in after Katrina and Rita in our country, because the Red Cross was taking care of feeding people. We doubled up on tents and the ponchos.
If an individual wants to contribute, as opposed to a Rotary Club or a church, and they want to get a tax deduction, they should make the check out to ShelterBox USA, which is a 501c3 corporation, and you can take a deduction for the full amount. But if you're a Rotary Club, you don't care. You can either send it to the UK or send it down to Florida. ShelterBox USA is stationed out of Florida.
Very good. Sue and Peter, thank you very much for your time and showing us the wonderful way and that people can help with disasters when they occur around the world. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
So until next time, I'm Clark Mason for Service Above Self, saying find a worthy cause and lend a helping hand.